Hi class, this is Dr. Stevens, just making what is probably going to be a final video on some suggestions as you prepare your literature reviews to be submitted on December 12th. Just want to remind you that the due date is December 12th. I moved it back from the 8th. I sent out an announcement to that effect. So anyway, it's due on the 12th at 11:59 p.m. and I cannot accept them late, so make sure you get them in on time. And I would suggest that you submit it early enough in the day that if you have any sort of trouble with Canvas or internet connection or whatever, that you'll have time to get that resolved and not be panicked and pushed up against the midnight deadline there. So anyway, I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving holiday. I did. I was in sunny St. George, and it was lovely down there. So I probably could go on for 30 or 40 minutes on suggestions here, but I'm just going to try to keep this brief. I would just recommend that rather than me trying to identify every single issue that you should be paying attention to, I would just recommend that you go back and review the papers that you've submitted already and that I've graded, and review the comments that I made in the margin there, and pay attention to the mistakes that need to be corrected, and have those be just right for your final paper. And I always feel really bad. I feel like all I do is pound on you that you made this mistake and you did this wrong, and that's not how that is intended. It's meant to just help you to do it correctly. So I never mean to be offensive or critical of you. I'm trying to help you get it correct. So just a few suggestions I want to go through here. One of them is you don't know who your reader is going to be. Now in this case, of course, it's going to be me, but in general, if you were submitting a scholarly work, you would never know who your reader is going to be. So have your writing be suitable for any audience to read, and don't address your reader personally. You don't know who that's going to be. You don't need to have an introduction such as, this is a review of the 8 articles for the research seminar class. You don't need to tell me that, and whoever else might read your paper, they certainly wouldn't need to know that either. So just have it be generic, a generic introduction that states what your topic is and what your purpose is, not knowing who your reader might be. Also avoid referring to your reader in the personal second person you. That's rarely appropriate to do that, so just avoid that. Now that you are combining together 8 articles, you're tying them together, and you're going to be, I'm assuming you're going to be jumping back and forth between articles. You're not just going to list article 1 and 2 and 3 and go on through them. That's not how you're going to do that. You'll be writing a narrative that tells a story and a cohesive account of what it is that you're trying to portray. So it's probable that your authors and your citations will be intermixed, and that being the case, whenever you are citing an author, you need to make sure that it is clear which article or which author you are referring to, especially if you happen to be referring to 2 or 3 in a short period of time or space in your paper, and then you bounce back to one that you've already referred to. You got to make sure that it's clear. So you should always have the author's last name at least. And when you're actually doing a proper citation, you would only have the author's last name. You don't need to have a first name or initial in there. And you would always need to include the year along with that. And then, of course, anytime that you are citing a quote, you have to have a page number accompanying that citation. So it would be, for example, say the author's name is Brown. So it would be the quote ending with a quotation mark, no punctuation, open parentheses, Brown, comma, the year 2017, comma, page, which is represented by a small lowercase p with a period, the page number, close parentheses, and then the period. That's the correct way to cite an in-text quote. Now, if you're doing a block quote, it's slightly different, and I'm not going to go into all that detail, but you need to be familiar with it. So go back to the APA template in modules. Take a look at that. There's also a PowerPoint in there that is very informative. And then I've also got in there a sample paper from a former student, and I've got some notations in the margins of that paper highlighting what has been done correctly and how you should be doing it. So take a look at all of those, and then of course, as I mentioned earlier, go back and look at your own papers that you've submitted and take note of the recommendations that I've made there. Just a couple of things that I just thought I should point out. Some of you are using all caps in a title of an article or in any other place. Other than in an acronym like NASA, as an example, you wouldn't use all caps. That's not really appropriate, not even just in APA, but just in English grammar in general. So even if the article itself in the publication is listed in all caps, that's a decision that that publication made, and that's fine for them. But for the APA format, it needs to not be in all caps. And then just one other thing about capitalization in your references. I know that it's really tempting to use capitalized words in your reference. Generally speaking, APA doesn't permit that. What it calls for is that the first word in the title of the article be capitalized and the remaining words not be capitalized up until unless you have a colon in the article title and then additional words after that colon, then the first word after the colon would be capitalized. So in general, you shouldn't have more than 2 words capitalized in your title, in your reference, on your reference page, and perhaps only 1 word. The exception to that would, of course, would be as if there's a proper noun in the title, then of course that's always capitalized. So for the example, the name of a city or the name of an organization or something like that, those would be capitalized simply because that's correct English grammar to do that. So try to avoid that that temptation to capitalize all those words in the title, in the references. Now, conversely, in your headings, in your paper, in a main heading, all of the relevant words are capitalized, but they're not all caps. And then in a secondary heading, all of the relevant words are capitalized, and then in a tertiary heading, none of the words are capitalized. So it's a little bit confusing. You'll need to look at that template and make sure that you're formatting your headings correctly. I'll reiterate that I don't want to see a running head at the top of the page, but if you're going to do that, make sure you do it correctly. I don't wish to see an abstract prior to between your title page and your first main heading. I don't need to see an abstract. Now, in a regular officially submitted scholarly paper for publication or for a dissertation committee, then yes, you would be required to have an abstract. You'd have to have several different types of abstracts. There's all kinds of rules for publication, but for the purpose of this course, we can avoid all of that. I would just suggest that you get to it, get working on it. It's going to take you a fair amount of time. I know that we tend to procrastinate and we think, well, I've already written all these papers, so all I've got to do is throw them together. It's not that simple. It's very complex when you start trying to knit together ideas and have it be flowing and have it read well and have it be interesting. And so you need to get started on that now, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Remember that this is not just a copy and paste of your previous assignments. This has to be really tied together well and illustrate the connections that you're trying to make, and identify really well the analysis that you are doing of these resources. Now, I'll go back and I'll remind you that these were supposed to be peer-reviewed publications, and I realize that's not always an easy thing to do, and some of you submitted articles that obviously were not peer-reviewed. I haven't whacked anybody on the back of the head too hard for that. I just wanted to have you gain some experience in finding and analyzing peer-reviewed articles and being able to recognize what is valid scholarly research, not just some opinion paper or some article that somebody wrote because they thought they knew something about it. Newsletters or even promotional pieces, those kinds of things are not scholarly works, even though they might contain valid information. So in the context of scholarly work, it does need to be peer-reviewed, which means it went through an editing process by a panel within the publication, or in the case of a dissertation or a thesis, the committee that approved that final work those are the editors of that. And so the point is that it's not just some person expressing their thoughts or reporting something that they found interesting or important. Generally speaking, scholarly work is based on actual research that was conducted, and the work is reporting the findings of that research, and that research model was valid and it was stated clearly, and it's a recognized model, and all of that. So I realize that you probably don't care too much about that, but as you move on to graduate school, those are the kinds of things that you will have to really pay attention to. And then going back to the idea of your topic, of course it's way too late to make any changes at this point. But generally speaking, the topic that you choose to research needs to be a relevant topic that adds to a body of knowledge. And some of the topics that you guys chose were interesting, and some of them are even, I would go so far as to say, they're fun. And that's fine for the purpose of this course. But for scholarly research, you would really need to be more deliberate and more focused on a topic that adds to the body of knowledge within a discipline that your peers would find useful and that they could then draw upon. I'll tell you, one of the biggest compliments of my career was to learn that my dissertation was cited by another doctoral candidate in her dissertation. I mean, that's like the ultimate compliment. And so that's really what you hope for, is that your work is recognized as valuable and that it's then utilized by others. So anyway, I've kind of rambled on, but just hope that this has been a good experience for you and that you've gained something of value. I really did appreciate the final discussion where you reflected and stated what you learned from this course, and particularly the advice that you would give to another online student. That's really important to me. I'm the director of our online program here, and we're always trying to find ways to make the online learning experience better, and so your feedback is very helpful and important. So anyway, best wishes to you, and take care in anything you do and your future efforts.